Well, good evening, folks. It is Tuesday, October 25th, 2022 at 6 p.m. and we're in the council chambers of the city of Platteville. And I am calling the regularly scheduled meeting of the Common Council to order. Candace, we'll start with roll call.
Kathy Kopp.
Yes, here.
Jason Artz.
Here.
Lynn Parrott.
Here.
Todd Casper.
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Eileen Nichols.
Here. Okay, the first thing on our agenda tonight is a presentation from the Platteville School District by Jim Babel, District Superintendent, and we welcome him to the podium.
So on behalf of the Platteville School District, thank you to the City Council for allowing us to share this discussion type format that we're having tonight. When we met back in August, that was at the beginning of this effort. And since then, the district has stayed true to two tenets. One, which would be, let's try and get as many people out to vote as we can. And the second would be when they vote that they become informed about what they're voting on. In front of the council members are two documents. One is just a little slip of paper reminding us to vote. And on the back side, it's a QR code that will take you directly to our referendum webpage. And that has been, from the start, that has been where all of our accurate information lies. So if you come across some information and it doesn't sound, well, maybe I should check into that. Your first step, I believe, would be contact one of our 9 board members or myself. If that is not an option, then go to that webpage and that can help out as well. Last Thursday evening, we had a live event in which I went through I think it's a rather thorough approach to help explain the reasoning behind the referendum. We talked about the projects. I also talked about the different financial implications of the referendum. And that is the other document in front of the board. That is just a copy of the slideshow that I walked through. If interested and you'd like to see, it's about 35 minutes long. That is also on that webpage. And we've also been sharing that out through our social media connections. So that does a nice job of capturing a lot of the effort behind this capital improvement, this facilities referendum. With that being stated, one of the benefits of having myself and other representatives of the school go out into the community and get into forums like this is to listen to questions. And then hopefully we're able to answer them. If we're unable to, we'll go back to the webpage, find some answers, share them back. But maybe there's a question out there that we haven't thought of that somebody needs in order for their vote to be what they want it to be. So with enough of that, I would like to open it up to the council if there are some questions that we can work through and hopefully improve everybody's understanding.
Does anyone on the council have a question? Jim, do you intend to go through this?
I do not.
Okay.
That's what the recording is. You can do that in your free time at your own leisure.
I see. Maybe just since there's quite an audience, maybe you could review just the kind of highlights of what the referendum plan would be, so that here, not only us, but since they don't have access to this, maybe you could kind of say, yeah. Good.
So one of the main questions that we've received is, I shouldn't say question, it's more of a misunderstanding. And that is, how did this all start? If you go back to the year 2015, prior to myself being in my position, the school district did a similar effort. You bring in an outside partner to come and review your facilities, and they bring a report back, a long laundry list of, here are things that you could do to update your facilities. So that was 2015. They went through that process. Referendum was approved, and that was then accomplished. So now here it is, 2022. We started this in February of 21, doing the same thing. And that misconception that we've been trying to iron out is, this isn't a situation in which our school districts are short of space. We have space. What we're trying to do is update our facilities for the next generation of students. The same thing that was accomplished in 2015, this is what we're trying to do in 2022. So you review the facilities, it goes through committees, it goes through different interviews. The next step was, once we have those items listed, was to send out that community survey. And that was in the spring of 22. And that survey listed all of the items that the district said we'd like to address. Survey came back, and the biggest response from the survey was, that's too much money. So from what was at that time 52 million is now been, we took out a large piece of the project. Now it's down to the 36 million. From there, we start to look at the campaign, keep asking questions. And then it was in the summer of 22, it was, let's narrow down what the projects might be. And then let's also do some estimating, bringing in our construction partners, our architect partners, our Baird is our financial partner, and having them say, okay, here's the list of things that we can do for this amount of money. And then on August 10th is when our board unanimously approved the question that is going to be on everybody's ballot on November the 8th. So that is a big part of the process. I think a lot of people want to know, why are you doing this? In short, it's so our facilities stay modern and we are ready for the next generation of students. And also it's to avoid having to do something drastic 10 years down the road. Adjust the facilities while we can now. So we have 4 campuses, and each of the campuses has some attention to it. The one campus with the most amount of attention, and thereby the most amount of money, is our high school. And starting inside the high school, it centers in our cafeteria and our kitchen, trying to bring in some natural light into the cafeteria. But with the kitchen, currently, it's the original late 60s design. There's a lot you can do to improve the efficiency and the safety of our cooks throughout the day. We need new dry storage. There are times where our cooks have to go outside to get dry storage and come back in. That's dangerous come February. There's also a new cooler, a new freezer, just a total kitchen remodel. Also within the high school, there is our auditorium, which is in fairly good shape, but it's in need of new lighting. And it's also difficult for somebody who has mobility concerns to get to our auditorium. To the east, there's an existing entrance. So we would work on that parking lot to the east, have a drop-off bubble to where somebody could be dropped off, but also place some handicap parking. And if you've been around that corner, there exists, it's an entrance. It says, welcome to the Platteville Auditorium, but you can't really get to it. I believe the remodel in 97 is what I was told. There were some classrooms added on that just made it awkward to get back there. So we wanted to improve access into that auditorium for our community, for all of the great shows that we put on. Also with that at the high school is we're trying to add 6,000 square feet of career and technical education classrooms, and that is to the south. Outside of the high school is one of those items that people have strong opinions on, and that is our activities complex. A good question to answer there is, when I've been out over the last month or so, I received the question, why do you need a new football field? University gives you a great deal. And that is true. This was never about building a new football field. The item of concern is our track. Our track is old. It's starting, the base is crumbling, the edges are crumbling, there's cracks. It's only a 6-lane track, which has its limitations when you want to host a meet and invite a lot of other teams there. It does not have lights. The bleachers are old. The concession stand's old. It really was the track. And the theory as we went through the process was, we have a 6-lane track. The space that's provided there would not allow for an 8-lane track, especially an 8-lane track with a 9th sprint lane, which is what is the standard. If you go around to other schools that are putting in new facilities, it's an 8-lane track. Mm-hmm. So that is why in the maps you can see, or if you go to the site, you can see that activities complex is placed up behind the high school. And that it's all because of the track. Now, if you're going to do a new track, you will end up with new bleachers, with a concession stand, with bathrooms, with all of those things around the track. And it makes logical, to me, it's a logical decision then. The infield of a track, you put a football field in there. But we also have a very strong interest, especially in the younger ages, in soccer. We have varsity and JV boys and girls soccer at the school, but also through City Rec and through Platteville Power Soccer, we have a lot of interest. So that inside of the track would be able to be used for football. It would also be able to be used for soccer school use, soccer use in the fall for the boys, in the spring for the girls. Our marching band and field show could just go right out their back door and practice. Because it is a turf proposition, it lengthens the season in which you can get onto that surface. So our classroom, our physical education classroom, can be outside more. Also, our spring sports, the balls, softball, baseball, they're dependent on when the frost comes out of the ground and then it leaves, and then your shoes aren't soaking wet when you're done. Well, this would also allow them an opportunity to get out early. We've spoken at length with Platteville Power Soccer. We've spoken with City Rec, and they are very supportive of this effort because they see the amount of use that this facility could get year-round for us. So that's kind of the big question there that I've been receiving, to get back to the start, was it's not about a football field. It's about a track, and then building an activities complex that can serve our students, but then also partner with our community with that. The middle school, in looking at the middle school, there are two big areas of concern there. The first was in our 7th and 8th grade hallway. We have 220, 230 students, 20 to 30 staff members, one set of bathrooms. That's 2 girls' stalls. In the boys' room, there's 1 stall and 3 urinals. When the architect came back, he said, you need more bathrooms. That would allow a lot. I know their staff members would be very grateful to have a bathroom closer to them, but it would also allow quicker transitions in between classrooms. So on that end of the school, be the south end of the middle school, placing bathrooms there, it is also construction-wise, it would make sense to just make those rooms. So the bathrooms would take up 1 chunk, and then we can add 2 or 3 classrooms there with a flexible idea of how we can use those to better serve our students. The second thing at the middle school is in the gymnasium. There is a stage. Stage currently isn't used very well. Things just kind of set up there. We would like to remove the stage and make that some sort of classroom. Possibly health education can go there, or some other activities. But the big thing at our middle school is when our families come into our building to watch an event, if somebody has mobility issues, they don't go in the same doors as everybody else. They have to go down a separate sidewalk and enter. We feel that's wrong. We want everybody coming in together. And so that would be the other safety and accessibility at the middle school. Westview Elementary in 2015 was a major focus of that facilities upgrade. We did some science labs throughout the middle school and high school, but also at Westview, there's a lot of work done there. And therefore, when they came through, and also when we asked the people, board members, administration, the biggest problem that we think we can solve is the parent pickup and the parent drop off. It's an elementary school that is placed in the middle of a residential area with tight city streets. So by having some sort of mechanism coming off of Western and also Camp possibly, that would be the target at Westview, to help with that, somehow increase the safety, decrease the amount of traffic that goes through there. And at Neil Wilkins, very similar start as to what we had at the high school. The first item was the kitchen in the cafeteria. Let's redo the kitchen. And currently, if you're familiar, the kitchen is kind of in a triangular, odd spacing. And when you go in the front doors, you're looking right at the serving line. So that's awkward. It's difficult to move kids in and out of that. So the existing gymnasium would have a new kitchen placed in that space, new receiving around back, and then remodel that area to have more of a flexible approach. So if we want to have an assembly with all the students, they aren't scrunched all together. We can bring in multiple presenters. It can be, in the school world, we call that a multi-use space or a cafe gymnatorium space. In order to do that, we would then have to build a gymnasium on the end, because we're using that current gymnasium as where that kitchen, the cafeteria, and then all that multi-use space is at. So that's where the gym is. The second big thing at Neil Wilkins is the entries. Just the way that it is designed and the way Mother Nature behaves, we have a lot of ice buildup. And so we would like to address some of the grading there, but more importantly, we'd like to build some canopies out. There are two main entrances at Neil Wilkins. We like to have some canopies that stick out. So if a student is waiting for a parent, they don't have to sit in the rain. It also keeps the ice away from that entryway. So long story short, those are the four campus. Going back to, this is a process that schools go through. I believe we've been thorough, we've been responsible, and we're at this point now, like I started, please, everybody go vote. And if you really are unsure about what you're voting, go to our information. There's accurate information there that you can make your decision. Did that spur any questions from the council?
Now, any question, Todd? Lynn? Ken?
Well, I have a question or two. I guess my first one is, have you spoken much to the legislature people for this area as far as what they're willing to do in the way of funding, support in way of funding?
Directly to support this project? No.
Well, to support the schools here in general and in Grant County, and to support the schools here in Platteville, yes.
So we do meet, Senator Markline, Representative Tranel are very accessible for the school district. And I've met with them, and I'm very clear. One of the biggest problems with public schools in Wisconsin is a reliable funding source. And every biennial budget, which we're going to go into that cycle here soon, it's kind of difficult to determine what you're going to get. There are other needs, other priorities throughout the state. But if we had, so right now we have the revenue limit that all schools have, and I had a brief conversation with Adam, and it's similar. It doesn't go up a whole lot unless there's a new element placed into it. Our biggest ask right now for our state legislatures is currently we have two funds. Fund 10 does a lot of our spending, and when we set our levy and we collect those property taxes and the state says, here's your aid, there's a little bit of federal aid there. Those are our main revenue sources. That's Fund 10. Fund 27 are special education costs. Now, as a public school, we are proud that if you lay your head in our district, we will do the best we can to serve you. Some students who have those exceptional needs require more funding. For example, if a student has a one-to-one paraprofessional that's paired with them, so that student can get into the classroom and learn. So that's a special ed cost. Currently, our state is they're not funding that nearly enough. They could do a lot more to say, no matter what the situation is, here are your costs. Currently, it's maybe 30% of those special education costs. 5-10 years ago, it was down to 20%. So it's inching up there. But that is one of those budgeted items that you really, going into a school year, you're not real sure how much that will be. But if you knew, let's say it's 50% of that cost, that would be a reliable funding source that we could now use to budget better. And and I'm estimating here because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think last year we had to take $1.5 million from our Fund 10 and put it into Fund 27 to cover those costs. That's significant. Now, that's a funding that if it were there, that'd be reliable. And that cost is consistently rising. So that, to answer your question, have we said directly, how about helping us out? No, but what we are pushing, myself, the superintendent's organization in the state, the School Administrator Alliance, CISA 3, we're really trying to get our legislatures to focus on that special education aid, because I believe that would help every school district in the state.
But we have so many referendums coming up this year. I talked with you, 166 this year, correct?
School referenda?
Yeah,
School
that's probably
referendum,
accurate.
166, 81 coming up in November. And to me, it looks like we're on a course of going downhill as far as funding education, as far as the state is concerned. The governor is recommending one level, the legislator in general is recommending another level. Different types of funding, and I don't think we're on a good course as far as what's happening here in the state of Wisconsin. That's my belief. So,
Okay,
Thank
Eileen, any questions? No question. Jason? Kathy?
No question, but a comment, Jim. I think you've done an excellent job with your presentation and putting the information together, so that people have all the information they need to make a good choice.
An informed decision.
Thank you, but it's been a complete team. No one person could do this. Many partners.
All right. Well, did I hear you also say the school annual meeting is
Tomorrow evening,
tomorrow evening?
Mhm.
So the annual meeting is held at the,
so 6:45 PM in the middle school commons that's below is the budget hearing. 7 PM is the annual meeting. And after that, we follow it up with a regular board meeting.
so if anybody's interested in attending the annual meeting,
Please do.
of course, all your meetings are open to the public, so anybody can attend at any time.
Correct.
So, okay, well, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the consideration of the consent agenda. We have council minutes from October 4th, October 11th, October 4th special meeting, October 11th regular meeting, and October 18th special meeting. We have payment of bills. I have no appointments tonight. Licenses, we have 1- and 2-year operator licenses to serve and sell alcohol. And we have a Class B combination beer and liquor license to the Up Second LLC in Platteville, Lisanne Mallet, agent, and these are premises at 75 North 2nd Street, commonly known as the gym.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Eileen and a second by Kathy to approve the consent agenda as presented. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Yeah, you can, yep. The next item on our agenda is citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. We ask you to limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes. And Paul Erickson, I call on you to talk about the UW Platteville Chancellor search.
Good evening. I'm Paul Erickson from University of Wisconsin, Platteville. I think as most of you know, at the end of May, Chancellor Dennis Shields left the university, is down at Southern University. Since that time, we've been having an interim chancellor, Tammy Avedovich. We are now in the process of going for the permanent position. The UW system is holding a listening session for the community next Tuesday night, 5 o'clock. It'll be at the university rooms of the Marquis Student Center. Regent Chris Peterson is chairing the search. She will be there as long as members of the search and screen looking for input. This is the point where what would you like to see the next chancellor of UW Platteville, the qualities, things that the interaction with the city, with the community, city council. So invite you to these listening sessions.
And Paul, it's on November 1st
Correct.
and it's at 5 PM and where?
It's in the university rooms of the Marquis Pioneer
Okay,
Student
Marquis
Center.
Pioneer Student Center. So the Marquis Center is kind of in the middle of campus.
Right.
And so it's in the university rooms, which are the big rooms on the second floor.
Correct.
And everybody always asks about parking. So if I come down there at 5 o'clock and I park,
We're fine because we don't take it past 4 o'clock.
okay, so parking should not be an issue because they don't ticket past 4 o'clock.
Unless you're there till 2 in the morning, then.
And then, well, yeah,
Then you probably
well,
have other
hopefully.
issues. So,
Okay.
yes,
So, and this is open to the public, open to any council, open to anybody in town.
correct.
It's just an open listening session. Okay,
Right. And that is also on our website as well. If you go to the first page of our website, there's a chancellor search update and they'll be updated with any future meetings as well.
and no RSVP is necessary.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I also have Carolyn Schultz, who has asked to speak during this time period about several things. Carolyn, 5 minutes.
Problem. I talk in shorthand.
Okay,
Yes, Miss Backstrom did well. My name is Carolyn Schultz. I am a native of Platteville, grade school, brick school, gray school. And then I went to the UW Platteville for 2 years. Anyway, I'm a native. I live in Peoria as I have for 30 years, but I have property here, which means taxes and other things. And I didn't come home for homecoming because my brother came home for his 65th reunion this past weekend. So I wanted to come for that, to see him, and went and checked at the library and was very, very happy to see that comments are tonight because I do feel very strongly. I am a native here. I'm getting very old. We won't go into detail, but I'm definitely beyond the 60 mark. But I wanted to incorporate mostly about the Gray School firehouse and secondarily about the armory. And the firehouse is in my heart because of the brick school burned down, then the Gray School was built when my mom was on the school board, and then it became a senior center. And I used to come home a lot. I do not now because of distance and other things. But when I heard from many sources that there was consideration of this being, as I understand, the senior center will be replaced, removed, and then the firehouse will be at that location. I've heard it's table, but will be decided. So I believe that's the status. As I read, I saw comments in the paper, mostly opposed to it, but I just wanted to tell the group and the council how much that means to a lot of us who grew up here, went to school here, and still have Platteville in our hearts, even if we don't live here. We still have our strong connection. So I am definitely not in favor of having a firehouse there. And I'll just say, because of the reasons I listed, there are others, but they are more superfluous. So, and I deeply appreciate the opportunity to do this, because if I had come before, I can't stay more than a week because I have things going on down in Peoria, but I am very grateful to be able to do this. And the secondarily is the armory. And of course, having grown up here, I remember the Red Arrow Division. And most of all, we used to have our KDTH teen hops there for those of us who are over 60. That was one of the fondest things. Yes, I remember that. I remember everything almost. And I feel, I don't know what's going to happen to the armory. I know you're going to vote tonight, but I just wanted to air both of my opinions. And I know that there are others who could not or would not come to the meeting, but I know that they feel very strongly, as I do, particularly about the firehouse. So I just wanted to say thank you again for letting me do this. And I used to have 4-H up here.
Oh.
Many, I remember everything. well, not everything, but we used to go over there. So my memories of Platteville are very strong. My father was a doctor. He passed a long time ago. And then my mother, Zelma, was on the school board, the library board, and she was vitally interested in everything in Platteville. And she's been gone about 15 years. I knew Barb. So again, I thank all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I believe that would conclude any citizens' comments, observations, and petitions from the audience. Is there anybody on the council that has a special event from a committee or anything to share? Okay. I think before we meet again, I believe the pasty sale at the the Friends of the Mining Museum pasty sale will have, your orders will have to have been in
November 4th is the deadline.
November. That's before we meet again. And I also believe that this weekend there are haunted mine tours, as I recall. And I assume you register online, Eric?
Yes, online or by calling the museum.
By calling the museum. And I also believe that this is the weekend for Sweet Treats on Main. So, and I guess I would also remind people that we have trick or treat hours on Monday. Doug?
5:30 to 7:30.
5:30 to 7:30. So those are kind of the reminders. It is Halloween weekend, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I know, it's hard to believe. All right, let us move on then to the reports. Were two reports in your packet. Airport Commission, Kathy, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
And Water and Sewer, Ken or Eileen, anything to add?
No addition on my part.
Okay, then let's move into our action items. The first of which is the Platteville Armory acquisition opportunity.
Yes, so during the October 11th Common Council meeting, a motion was made to table the potential action on this matter. A request was made by council members to have city staff create a more detailed financial pro forma for council consideration. So again, to recap some of the discussion at prior meetings, the Platteville Armory was built between 1940 and 1942, utilizing a $32,000 bond issue approved referendum. The referendum passed with the understanding that the National Guard would be responsible for making rent payments to offset the borrowing. The finalized budget for the original project was $100,000, with the remaining funds being covered by Works Progress Administration funds. Around 1985, the Platteville Armory was officially sold to the Wisconsin Department of Military Affairs for $50,000. So due to the community's contributions to the Armory construction, the city of Platteville has long had an agreement with the Wisconsin Department of Military Affairs to use the facility for a variety of community activities. Most notably, the hardwood drill floor is used by the city recreation department for basketball leagues, karate classes, and other sports. The Armory has also been a city voting site and used by the police department for training. Throughout the years, conversations have been had with the Department of Military Affairs about their eventual desire to sell the property. We were notified by the Department of Military Affairs that they are in the process of decommissioning multiple armory sites in the state of Wisconsin to improve their grant profile for possible federal assistance. During past Common Council meetings, the following options have been focused on in more detail. Option 1, outright purchase of the property at DMA's requested price of $135,000. Originally, the DMA was requesting a purchase price of $320,000. The price was reduced to $170,000 based on an approximately $150,000 reduction to cover potential lead mitigation costs of the former basement firing range. Further negotiations with the city garnered a final reduction to $135,000. The Department of Military Affairs has provided an update that they are willing to accept a closing date, which could be proposed as of January 31st, 2023. So if the city were to acquire the property, there are potentially two scenarios to review under this option. Scenario 1 would be the Armory continues to be under city ownership. Obviously, the advantages to this are the city has control over building utilization. The gym space would be scheduled by Park and Recreation and also available for rental from other organizations or businesses. The basement floor would be utilized by the Park and Recreation Department as a complete shop location and storage area. And the second floor would be scheduled for recreational activities or could be rented to organizations or businesses for utilization. The first floor offices could be utilized by either Park and Recreation or by other city staff. The downfall, obviously, to this option would be an increase to city budget to cover the overall cost of running and owning the facility. The second scenario to consider would be the property is sold to prospective buyers. The city would have control over who purchases the armory and obviously the ability to set the official terms. The minimum sale price of $150,000 for the armory site and the 3 lots currently making up the parking lot and remaining vacated spaces could be, or vacated street could be included to make a $150,000 sale. The use of the gym for regular scheduled Platteville recreation at no cost to the city for a period of 5 years could be proposed in the request for proposals. And then obviously the buyer would be responsible for assuming the property as is, and they would be required to continue to test the gym area for lead on a regular basis. The advantage, obviously, to this consideration is the property would be placed back on the tax roll and generate additional revenue for the city of Platteville, while also allowing us to continue to have a venue for recreational programming. The downfall would obviously be the loss of control of the property for other departmental uses. Then there's option 2, which essentially would be to decline the purchasing the property and allow the DMA to list the property on the Wisconsin surplus. The negatives of this obviously would be the city has no control over future ownership of the property. If the city is no longer able to utilize the property for recreational purposes, then potentially the city could see a cost increase to our budget to cover new rental spaces for recreational programming, or what is currently being proposed in our budget, a loss of revenue for programs that can no longer occur due to space needs. The community obviously would then see a reduction of program offerings or reduced capacity limits due to space limitations, as we're currently seeing. We're doing kind of a test run right now, and we are having reducing to our program in regards to volleyball and a lot of our intro to sports because we don't have that space. So we're looking at other areas. Obviously, then, if the property is sold to a for-profit entity, this would be a positive. It would be placed back on the tax roll and obviously generate additional revenue for the city. So as far as we go with the budget and fiscal impacts, Director Lowe, Director Maurer, and I have been reviewing a potential financial pro forma to provide the Common Council to review budgetary implications. So attached, obviously, to this document are estimated costs for the yearly operations budget for the facility, as well as estimated additional costs for mitigation and acquisition. City staff will go over in more detail how we arranged at these financial figures during the meeting discussion. So if you go to the next page, which obviously has kind of the brief pro forma here, what we looked at is Director Lowe was able to have a analysis done by a realty company, Deb Jenny, to kind of give an analysis of potentially what we could rent the property for. So what you can see here is we have a quick pro forma that we put together, which has the expenses, which has a couple of assumptions. Number one, this would assume hiring a full-time building maintenance assistant to cover the building because we're taking on an additional building. It would assume the employee will be taking a family plan for insurance, just to kind of consider that as an option. The numbers for the water and sewer were pulled from billing history. The gas and electric were provided by the Department of Military Affairs. And obviously then this establishes line items for professional services and building and grounds, which could be reduced if chosen by the council. So what that came to is obviously a yearly cost of about $112,000 when you account for everything there. Then the offsetting revenue is essentially you have the first floor kitchen rental space that would be an option. You could rent out the office spaces. You could have the second floor classroom rental, and obviously there's the basement room floors that could be rented as well. So potentially there's about $46,000 that has been estimated as revenue that could be generated on rentals. So when you take the expenditures, obviously minus the revenue, that leaves you with a shortfall essentially of $66,000. So without any additional revenue, now this also does not include the potential of renting out the gym, because right now that's so variable, we couldn't really come up with a calculation of what that could be. We didn't want to put this in the pro forma. So what this would be showing is essentially in order for the city to take this on, we would be looking at about a $66,000 tax liability that would be required. And if you recall, roughly about $48,000 equates to a 1% increase in the tax rate. So this would essentially be about a 1.5% increase that would have to be covered somehow in future budgets. So essentially that's something to consider, is that if you take this on and it's a city asset, we either have to find reductions to make up that difference, or you're essentially asking anybody who is a taxpayer in the future, that is going to have to be considered in the budget, is how do we handle that? Either we have to find additional revenue sources, or you're going to have to make a reduction, or you're asking for an increase in order to cover that. So just want to keep that in mind. So obviously there's a lot of information also that was provided in here. There was some history in regards to some of the improvements that they made to the property since 1990. There was about $1.1 million that the DMA indicated they invested. They had a list that they also provided of all of the different things that they've done to the facility. They provided some maps. We obviously had Jenny provide from Platteville Realty a synopsis of how they kind of came up with their numbers. We've got the information from the DMA and the water usage. So again, if the common council wanted, they can direct staff to outright purchase the armory property for the requested value of $135,000, or again, a value of your choosing. The funding to support such an endeavor would be recommended to come from a short-term anticipation note with a local bank or through the assistance of our municipal advisor. The money would then be paid back by a potential buyer or would have to be incorporated into a future long-term borrowing when the city borrows for capital improvement projects or road projects for 2023. A budget amendment will then have to be made in 2023 to incorporate reserve funding to cover the expenditures needed to handle the creation of a new cost breakdown for the armory if the city takes on official ownership. And then obviously in the 2024 budget, then we would have to have some consideration about what would happen going forward. So when we get to the recommendation section, obviously the key advantages to having ownership of this facility would be the continued ability to operate recreational programming out of the facility and lease space for potential small businesses or occupants currently within OA Gray. For instance, that would be the Elks Club, particularly looks for rooms. They could possibly do that. And there have been some conversations with Head Start as well. The key concerns with this opportunity are the increased costs, which would have to be incorporated into the budget to cover the annual operating costs of the building and the long-term mitigation. Currently, there is the potential to cover portions of this cost through potential rental revenue avenues. In the event the expenditures exceed the revenues generated, as we talked about, the only option is for those costs to be covered by a tax levy, which would result in a potential tax increase or service level reductions to cover the shortfall. Another concern is if we don't find a way to gain utilization of the property, our park and recreational programming will continue to see reductions in numbers and potentially see the inability to provide certain programs. City staff also feels the RFP process is an avenue that needs to be explored to maximize the return of investment to the city, increase the tax base, and allow our park and recreational activities to continue in a familiar venue and forum. This is the current recommendation from staff. City staff are also looking for a recommendation from the Common Council on how they would like to proceed.
Okay, so are there any questions on Adam's presentation from council members? I do have somebody who has asked to speak. So first, well, maybe any quick questions before we have discussion? Any clarifications you need from Adam on his presentation? This would be clarification.
Quick clarification, if the council would decide to go to the RFP route and turn around and sell that and still have access to the first floor gym for recreation, would it require the expense of having a staff person?
No, so that's something certainly that we could look at. Obviously, there's going to be, I think there would be some negotiation back and forth because with any agreement, are they going to require, we set the terms. So if we can get somebody to agree to that, no problem. But obviously, if there is a counter, they may require the city to pay something, whether that's rent or whether that's, money to go towards upkeep. But I would agree, we would not have the responsibility. If we essentially went to an RFP, we would not be responsible for having a building maintenance person then.
Okay, because what I'm looking at
Right.
is
That performa is essentially, we take it on 100%.
right.
Right.
And the potential tax levy of that 1.5% for that 66,000, and that's only if the potential revenue is the best case
Is maxed
scenario.
out. Correct.
Then basically what we'd be looking at, best case scenario, if all of that potential revenue was there, in spite of, we'd still have to have a tax levy increase to have staff.
Right. I mean, that's obviously the number one question that you would have to decide as a council is if we, the recommendation would be if you're taking on this building, we probably need to look at additional staff. Now, whether that's full-time or part-time, this is again, kind of giving you the worst case expenditure scenario is you bring on a full-time person, they're taking a family plan. That's what it looks like. Obviously, as the council, that can be a discussion with staff about, well, what happens if you don't have that? We'll find a way as we've done in other ways, but there's going to be there's going to be questions about that. Is there a service level delivery? Those are some of the impacts. But what that shows you is essentially if you buy this building and you bring on a full-time person to essentially assist in the maintenance of it, you're looking at, best case scenario, if you rented out every single space in that building, yeah, there is the potential that you have a 1.5% increase in order to cover it. And how you handle that is that's the decision as a city. Is either you're asking taxes to cover it, or you're reducing something, you got to cut something then to make up that difference. So either as a whole in the city, we're finding somewhere to cover up that if it's, if the magic number does 66,000, you got to find something in the city budget that essentially is either we're growing by 66 or we're cutting by 66.
Okay, no one else has questions on the presentation. So Isaac Shanley has asked to speak about this issue. So Isaac.
Well, Isaac Shanley, 1030 Seymour Street here in Platteville. So Adam covered quite a bit of the stuff here, so I'll kind of keep it short. But one of the things he did mention is, going over the numbers that were provided, and I'm not sure I would agree with the numbers on the rental portion of it. If it was fully rented, you're looking at a $66,000 loss still. And like I said, that's if it was rented at those numbers, which I don't think would be, and it would be full. And even for the first year, until you do get somebody in there, you're going to be over $100,000 just in the first year alone. That doesn't cover the purchase of the property. So the 66,000 is over a 1% increase in taxes, let alone the purchasing of the property. So, the purchase of the property, for 135,000 compared to when the property was sold in 85 for 50,000, plus the cost of mediation, and then possibly losing 66,000 plus a year. I mean, it doesn't take a financial genius to show that's not a good investment on a property. So the third one is the improvements list that was supplied. I looked over those, and it was nice that they put over $1 million into that property, but that was already over 11 years, just about 11 years ago. You still haven't shown anything for, other property or items that are going to need to be invested in, HVAC, cooling, plumbing. The roof is already, some 11 years old. So, and everybody keeps talking about, this is a large building, but remember, large buildings cost a lot more to maintain and to repair and to replace items on compared to just a small house or a small building. So that needs to be taken into consideration. I myself, this last year, I paid about $49,000 in taxes in the city last year. I would like to see that put in other areas. This year alone, Howard was able to do 2 streets is all. That was down from what should have been. We're way down on street construction. As mentioned at the last meeting, the street department has been asking for and needs a new building and needs repairs. That's been delayed for years. The water and sewer department's buildings and equipment, again, already delayed. And now you're thinking about adding another building onto something with additional costs when you can't even maintain or provide the services that we have now in a good manner. We just heard Mr. Babel give a presentation, and this is out of the control of the city. But this is a referendum that, if passed, again, is going to add additional taxes to the city as well. So we're adding some on here. So, excuse me, so I asked the council members to turn down the request for the purchase of the property outright. And I also asked the council not to take any action to turn down the RFP in the property. And to have the city manager inform the city that the city is not interested in the property and to place stuff for sale to the public. Again, as he stated, there could be some downfalls in this, but also could add some city taxes back onto the properties. Now this is for the council here. If you decide to approve this as a purchase or for an RFP, be ready to explain to the citizens of this great city when asked that the city has already fallen behind on street construction, reconstruction, building maintenance, water and sewer issues, and other costly issues which have been delayed with almost certainly would be raising real estate taxes to go up next year. How are you able to vote in favor of purchasing another property which guarantees an annual loss of money and also guarantees an annual increase in real estate taxes? So that's all.
Thank you. Okay, council questions. I have a couple of questions. First of all, this property is currently zoned
Institutional.
So any other use would require
a rezoning to go in front of the plan commission and then be approved by the council.
Does that include if the city purchases it and puts it for an RFP? Joe is shaking his head yes.
Zoning wouldn't change regardless of what process you follow. So they'd be limited to whatever the uses of the institutional district are. Whether it's RFP or they sold outright by the National Guard, it's still the same zoning.
So what are the uses for institutional?
Schools, daycares, recreational facilities, office type uses. Basically the types of uses that have been in there.
So can it be a storage facility?
It could be storage if it was, associated with allowable use. If it was just rented out storage, somebody was just buying the building to lease out storage space for private, that would be a use that I think would have to be at least a conditional use. I'd have to check the zoning. But if it was storage associated with an allowable use, obviously that would be allowable. So a recreation office facility that had storage in the basement, that's, accessory to the principal use.
So other council members, my concern, I'll voice right away. My concern is if it goes, if the city has no control over it at all, and the zoning isn't tight enough or restrictive enough, I guess I would say it could turn into a pretty messy. It has the potential to turn into a messy location on a major street in our town. Is that true?
Like I said, I mean, it's limited by what the zoning is as far as the uses are in there. I mean, it would be up to the council to change it. So if you don't like.
So we could could we rezone it before it was sold?
That's an option. Yeah. You could rezone it and then make it as part of the RFP. That's,
Or
you own it, you
we-
can do whatever you want with it.
If we owned it, we could do it. But as long as the Department of Military Affairs owns it, it's zoned institutional. And if we refuse it in total, then it goes on the auction block as zoned institution.
Right. So right now, the specific uses within the institutional district are cemeteries, schools, hospitals, religious and charitable institutions, penal and correctional institutions, assisted living facilities, nursing homes, homes for the aged, clinics, including pharmacies, daycare, childcare centers, sports fields, government and cultural uses, leasing of parking lot or parking spaces for uses not associated with the property. And then conditional uses would be utilities, public passenger transportation terminals, bed and breakfast establishment, communication towers, which are not co-located on existing tower, private kennels, business kennels, animal grooming businesses. Those are your conditional uses. So
it could be a dog kennel.
if they'd have to get a conditional use, which you would have to approve.
So I'm
Right.
voicing my concern if we don't have any control over it at all. What is the worst, kind of the worst picture we can see?
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be
And
limited.
maybe a
right.
dog kennel isn't the worst.
It's good.
picture,
Yeah.
but-
I mean, the specific uses right now, if it's anybody that if it's schools, hospitals, religious and charitable institutions, if somebody buys it and it's a specific use, you have no control. It's allowed in our zoning. It is going to be a little bit more limited, but that's where somebody is probably going to come to. If somebody buys it and they want to use it for something outside of institutional, they're coming in front of the planning commission and the council and requesting that. So you have a little bit control over somebody changing it. But what somebody could do is they could buy it and just, if they store it and if they're not truly using it, as long as it does, as you indicated, as long as you don't see it and it's inside, we really don't have a lot of control as a city. So if you buy it and you're a business and you're storing stuff in there, we're probably not going to know that. Where we're going to know it is if it starts to seep out into the parking lot and everything else. Yes, then that's where, you have the ability as a city to enforce that. But realistically, if it's not that, that's really the only other option they would have.
Other questions that council members may have, that was my big question on the zoning and the potential. I mean, frankly, I'm not interested in losing $66,000 a year. Just not interested in that.
Right.
But I'm also not interested in creating some kind of issue in the middle, really in the middle of our city. All right. others that have issues or
Yeah, I have a
questions?
question.
or-
Is it historic? Is it designated as an historic structure? Is it on the historic structure list?
It's not designated. It has been determined eligible with during the previous historic survey that was conducted.
So if somebody else buys it, what do we do about the fact that we own the parking lot?
So that would obviously be something, I think, if the determination is made by the council that you do not want that, I think that would be part of when they put it up for sale. Essentially, you have that option as a council, is you can keep it and you have the opportunity in the long term, ever in the future, you want to put a road there, you can put a road, or you can offer that as part of when they put it up for sale. You can offer those lots as well. You can work with the DMA on that jointly. The intention is they're going to be deeding, they're going to deed where the current, is it the well that's currently there? Like what is? currently
it's-
there?
Booster station.
Booster station, that's right. The booster station's there, that is going to be deeded obviously to the city. Is there the potential that whoever buys it could ask, some of that process, they may ask for some costs from the city? That's possible. I'm not going to say that would be an option. So we would want to tried to get that ironed out before they sold it. So our intention would
Okay.
be to get that fully kind of finalized and figured out. But that's up to the council, is you can either keep those lots because we currently own them, or if somebody buys it and they have a long-term plan, you can sell it to them.
There's one access to our parking area now, and it also is used by the building,
Right.
correct? Is
Correct.
there some kind of an easement or something, any record of control over that?
Not that I'm aware of.
We vacated a street there.
Right.
I know we vacated a street there.
And I guess my other question is assumes hiring a full-time building maintenance assistant. I know we had talked about hiring an assistant. Anyway, would that be this person and they would do other buildings as well, or is this a separate, totally new?
So that's one of the conversations, obviously, to talk about or think long-term, is if you buy this, that's up to the council basically to determine as far as staffing. Because when we're adding new positions, that end result ends with you as council members then as an elected officials. So I think the understanding would be that person would be utilized obviously in multiple areas, but it would more or less be if we're bringing on another building that is outside, we need to consider the fact that right now we have one building maintenance specialist. So, that would be something we'd be looking at. Now, whether that's a part-time position, whether it's seasonal, I think those are conversations. Obviously, if the direction is that the council wants to move with the purchase of this, we can come back to you as staff and kind of iron that out and give you some scenarios of, okay, maybe we could try it as a seasonal assistant, see how that goes, and then build it up. Or we wanted to give you kind of, okay, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is you're hiring a full-time person to try to assist with that. So there's options. Now, the other conversation to this, which I think Bob could probably talk to a little bit, is if we're moving if we take on ownership of it and Park and Rec is moving there, you may not need a building maintenance specialist now. Those are some of the things that can kind of play back and forth. Again, those are all conversations that can continue to be had, but we wanted to present a scenario to you that showcased, okay, if you're bringing on a building, you should have somebody who is responsible for that. There's the cost. And is there anything I'm missing there, Bob, that you want to add on?
The reason I ask, Adam, is the largest portion of the funding that is allocated here, the 112, for that
Right.
position. And we talked at budget time about the need for another individual.
Yes. So I think this would play into it, is that now would it totally be in there? This is showing that it is. Now, is there the possibility that that would be feathered through other departments? Potentially, but right now it's showing if you're bringing it on, this is one of the areas that they're primarily going to be responsible for. So the majority of the portion right now of that cost is going to be here.
Either way, the position is there
Right.
possibly.
Correct. So you'd have to
But
consider it.
I'm just,
Yep.
it's not necessarily that it's all allocated to the cost of the
No, but
armory. Yeah.
Todd?
I have a motion.
Oh. Does anybody else have question? I mean, are we ready for a motion?
I have a question. We have a potential that's interested in it. Am I hearing that right? We do have one somebody who's interested in it?
So there have been businesses and business owners that have reached out to the city and expressed an interest. Now, the $1 million question to that is when you put out an RFP, are those individuals going to respond? You know, possibly. I think there certainly is interest. So if you were to go the RFP route, do I think you're going to get interest from somebody? Absolutely. You know, that's the question's going to be, it's twofold as we talked about. You're taking on a short-term borrowing to essentially cover that because right now there is no additional funding source. So the $1 million question kind of comes to the point that Isaac brought up is, okay, how long does that take for you? What's the return on the investment? It's how long, you know, it's possible that you may get people to apply, but then the $1 million question is what happens if they don't? Now you have a building. So there's pros and cons to both sides.
And any question?
No questions. Excuse me.
Todd, you said you had a motion.
I do. A motion to authorize the staff to direct the Department of Military Affairs to list the property for sale.
Is there a second to the motion?
We need to first take it off the table.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
I guess we have a motion to take it off the table. We should have been doing that before.
I would make the motion to take this subject.
Thank
off
you.
the table.
Do I hear a second to the motion to take it off the table?
I second it.
All right, now we'll vote on the motion to take it off the table. This is not having anything to do with the purchase. This is just to allow us to discuss it, which we already did. So Candace will vote.
Cop. Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols. Motion carries.
All right, now that we have it off the table and can actually discuss it and have already done that, Todd, you can now offer your motion again.
I have a motion to authorize staff to direct the Department of Military Affairs to list the property for sale.
And do I hear a second? Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second? So there's no motion. Okay.
I'll move to authorize staff to work with the Department of Military Affairs on the acquisition of the armory for $135,000 to then be sold through an RFP process.
Do I hear a second to that motion? Okay, we have a motion that staff worked with the Department of Military Affairs to purchase the property at the requested price of $135,000 and to pardon?
I only said RFP process.
RFP, yeah, you said RFP process. And to authorize the city to do an RFP process for it. So not to be run by the city. Okay, so the motion is to purchase the property, do an RFP. The city does not run the facility. And the purchase price would be $135,000. There has been a motion and a second.
The RFP is for the sale of the property. I just think we should state that in the motion if that's the intent.
RFP for the sale of the property.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we can add that as well then.
Okay, so the RFP would be for the sale of the property. So the city would purchase the property at $135,000 and then immediately do an RFP to sell the property. Okay. That's the motion. That's the second.
sell the entire property?
To sell the DMA property, the Department of Military Affairs property. Not necessarily the property that's owned by the city there, but I think the only thing under consideration at this particular time is the property that's owned by the Department of Military Affairs, which does not include 3 lots that are on the, I don't know, on the north side of what used to be a street. Kathy?
Allowed to ask a question?
Yeah. If you
So,
need clarification on this
I do
motion,
need clarification because the motion that's out there, if the staff pursues this and we don't get an RFP, does that mean this?
you mean, you don't get anybody to respond to the.
Right.
We'll do an RFP, but yeah.
But is this to be done before we make a commitment? Department of Military Affairs, I mean, or are we looking, or is this motion saying we're gonna buy it and then we're going out for an RFP?
So essentially what you're authorizing the city staff to do is the worst case scenario is you are directing us to purchase the property for 135,000, which again, we'll have to come back to the council for an official. There's gonna have to be something, an official document or something along those lines. But essentially we'd be purchasing it for 135,000 and then going out for RFP. If there is a way that we can delay that purchase until the RFP is finalized, we can try to see if the Department of Military Affairs is willing to do that. But worst case scenario right now is you're giving me as the city manager the authority to indicate to the Department of Military Affairs that we will be purchasing this property for 135.
Whether or
If-
not.
Whether or not anybody buys it.
And, but if no one responds to an RFP, that means the city's gonna own this building.
Until you get a willing buyer, correct? That is what that would mean, is you
Which
will be
would be never.
continuing to do an RFP until somebody buys it.
Is there any way we could make an amendment perhaps to lower the purchasing price to $100,000?
You can offer a friendly, you can offer an amendment to this.
I'm
motion.
just saying something
Yeah.
that gives us maybe a little more financial
Hmm.
benefit.
So are you suggesting an amendment?
I would suggest an
price?
amendment that we lower that to $100,000, I think would be reasonable, maybe even 90 to 100,000. It gives us a little more of a advantage, I guess, if we're trying to resell this as an RFP, if that's how we decide to go.
100,000, so we have so seldom amendments to motions.
So the amendment has to be accepted by both the person who made the motion and the person who made the second.
Does the second need does the amendment need a second before we ask?
No, because it has to be approved by basically, you're making an amendment. It has to be approved by the person who made the motion and the person who made the second.
All right,
So if
so
neither
we're
one of them
saying
accepted, it
reducing the
doesn't-
price to 100,
Offer the DMA $100,000.
$100,000. That's the amendment?
But the amendment has to be approved by the whole council.
It has to be approved by the original people that made the motion, and then as the entire council, you have to vote for it. So right now it goes, Jason made the motion, he would have to agree, then it goes to Eileen would have to agree, then it goes to the entire council, and that's what you're voting on.
All right, do you agree to his amendment?
Yes.
Do you agree to his amendment? Yes. Okay, Candace, we will now vote as a council on the amendment that Todd offered to reduce the price offer to DMA to $100,000.
Cop, excuse me, Cop. If I could ask you
She
guys
said
to
no.
talk into your microphones because
No.
it doesn't record. if it-
No.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much. Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
No,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so now the motion is that the city staff be authorized to purchase the property at $100,000 and go to RFP for selling or getting rid of the property. Okay, so the city would then own the property, go to RFP and or develop an RFP,
Correct.
put it out and look for someone to buy it, hopefully for more than $100,000. Okay,
I would just like to note, and I'm sure that everyone else knows this, the city or the DMA purchased it for 50,000 in 1985, so we're doubling their money. So I think reasonable. The other thing is that they are using as I understand, an office in the building yet? Didn't-
Yes, so that is something that can be put into the agreement that has
I-
been talked about is
Yeah,
we
and I
would
was gonna
continue to
say,
give them a space to
They're paying about
utilize.
$3,000 a month, and in
Right.
12 years, they would recoup that money, so you might remind them of that. 1,000 sounds pretty good. So they get their 35 back.
Okay, so now we're making a motion that the city staff offer the DMA $100,000 for the purchase of the property. And then the city go develop an RFP to sell the property with. Okay, yeah, that's.
We'll bring that
that's what
back to,
you-
the right,
yeah,
we'll bring that back to the council.
right. So we're ready to vote. Kathy, you still have a question mark on your,
I do. Okay, I'm still concerned that if we vote to do this and there is no response to an RFP, we are going to own that building.
that's
And
right.
we're going to have to find $100,000 to purchase that building. We have abatement issues. We have maintenance issues. We have we don't know what realistic revenue could happen within the next 18, 24, 36 months. We know we're going to have expenses, and my concern is we don't have the money. Where's the money? That's,
I hear you.
that's where I'm concerned.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned with that too. But I'm also concerned with, there is a whole group, a community that wants a community center. So now we do take a big risk, and I'm hoping like with the RFP, we still can use the gym, right? So I feel you, like if we do this and nobody steps up, we still have to find the funding. But then are we still responsible to the people that want it? You know what I'm saying? I think at very good point. But I'm just like, there are people who, you know, I'm torn too. I feel you, I'm torn too.
Perhaps we could make a commitment today to move forward in the future within the next couple of years and try to build a more modern facility that the community can use, because obviously the community, we want a senior center that's modern.
Right.
We want a place for our recreational people to be,
Right.
and we want something that we can look forward to another 50 years.
Right.
Like, we're looking backwards with this.
Yeah.
We're looking at an older building that needs a lot of work. And the same amount of money put forward, I think, is going to benefit our future generations, perhaps as long as this building did.
Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
Anybody else have comments they whether to offer before we vote? So the motion is to offer the DMA $100,000. The expectation being that the staff develop an RFP and that the building be sold and that the city not operate this facility. Of course, there's no guarantee for the second part. And there's no guarantee also that the DMA or DMA
Go for that.
would go for $100,000. All right. We're voting. Candace.
Cop.
No.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes, yes.
Casper,
No.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
No,
Nichols. Motion carries.
Okay. Let us move on to the next item on our agenda. I can find it. The next item on the agenda is the planned unit development, the SIP for 305 East Side Road.
Yes, this is a request from Family Advocates to construct a new facility at that location. It would be a combination office space for their use as well as a domestic shelter. 13,240 square foot building. This was the first part of the PUD was already approved. This provides additional details on the building. There's plans in your packet. The first part was approved contingent upon a development agreement, which I believe you've seen a draft of that, but it's not been finalized at this point. So it's this additional information. The project is still basically in conformance with the first part that was approved prior. As I mentioned, just provide some additional information. So staff would recommend approval of the specific implementation plan, also subject to a development agreement.
So the development agreement is not under discussion tonight. This would be approving the SIP. But the project can't go forward until a development agreement would be signed.
Correct.
So the development agreement is not under for discussion tonight. This is simply the SIP. Questions?
Well, I have some questions about design of the building itself.
Okay.
So my first question is, I talked to Dan about this. What is going to be the drainage around the building? In other words, the drainage, will that be going into what you have 5 drains it's going to go into? Is that correct? Storm sewers?
Dan, do you want to come to the podium? Well, it might be all.
So the question is basically, is there a potential for water coming into the building?
No, if you look at page C102, I believe that they provided you with a little bit larger set of plans to look at. What there are is we have perimeter drains to pick up all of the roof drains as well as the water from the green space that's on the north side. Those roof drains, or excuse me, those drainage inlets on the north side of the building in the green space, they are 6 inches below the finished floor of the building. However, we're going to have our area back there so that if those would ever plug, the water would drain around the east side and west side of the building and go into the parking lot, so it would not come into the building.
So it's not like a building where you get snow up next to the building and it might melt next to the building and go into the building.
That would not be the intent.
Okay, next thing is, excuse me, what are the walls as far as our rating? What is the insulation value for the wall?
The final insulation R value has not been determined. However, we have to follow the Wisconsin Energy Code, which is part of your building approval process to the state of Wisconsin. So we'll be following the state of Wisconsin requirements.
Would that be something like 20?
That's
You don't
whatever,
know?
I don't know off the top of my head.
What about the ceiling? What's the R value in the ceiling?
Whatever the minimum requirement is from the energy code. So basically, part of the building package that has to go to the state, that includes site plan, the floor plan that talks about all the code items. We have to do energy calculations to make sure that it passes. And it's not just the R value, but it's about ceiling. It's a whole envelope calculation.
Okay, my next question is, excuse me, about straight line winds. Do you have any requirement as far as the roof, the building being able to withstand straight line winds? 80 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, what?
Once again, we are going to be designing the building to meet the Wisconsin building code, which follows the American Society of Civil Engineer requirements for wind loading. And I believe the wind loading for this part of the state is 90 miles an hour, I believe.
Okay, my next question is, what about winds against the exterior walls? Such as wind from a tornado?
We will be designing it to the ASCE requirements in the code, Ken. We're not going to be building a building that can withstand a tornado. That's
Not-
just the
not
reality of it.
withstand a tornado?
No, we're not gonna be, we would have to be building probably a precast building with a concrete roof in order to withstand a tornado. I mean, that's just the reality of it. The cost to build such a structure would be tremendous, and I don't think there's a grant that would even support that unless you're getting a special storm shelter, say like in the village of Bagley or Cassville where they have a campground. And then they're talking a building the size of, say, this room here, not a 13,000 square foot building. That's just
Well, then,
reality and economics.
my next question is, what is the potential, what are you doing for protection to keep the roof from lifting off?
They will follow, there's requirements in the code for that, whether it's residential or commercial. And so we're going to follow those requirements, whether it's strapping, there are clips, et cetera, to prevent that from happening.
Do they strap the roof to the foundation?
It will, no, not like they do down in Florida for the hurricanes. It's basically a connected system. I mean, the roof system connects it to the wall system to the foundation.
So there's no direct connection between the roof and the concrete foundation?
No, it's going to be a pre-engineered steel building.
And then all the safety area for persons will be where? In the interior?
Interior, we talked about,
Hallway?
yeah, we talked about that last time for the GDP. That'll be in the kind of the center cafeteria area.
Well, I don't think I want to be in the building. There's a tornado.
There's probably a lot of buildings you don't want to be in,
Correct.
if you're having a direct hit tornado.
I have a house that I anchored the roof to the footing. Been doing it.
Right. We're going to meet the Wisconsin Building Code requirements.
Yes, but that's.
Well.
Okay, anybody else with any questions about the SIP phase? Now, the recommendation is approval of this phase, subject to the approval of a development agreement, and the development agreement is not on our agenda tonight. Questions? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the plan unit development specific implementation plan for the Family Advocates Office and Shelter at 305 East Side Road, subject.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this SIP phase of the planned unit development for family advocates, subject to the development agreement. So Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
No,
Nichols,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the certified survey map for Southwest Health, the Southwest Health Development. Joe.
Yes, so to continue with their development that's already underway, they'd like to have a certified survey map completed, which will formally dedicate part of that street as a public street. And at this point, they'll just be creating 2 larger lots with the understanding that as they get a prospect, a developer, a project that has a specific need, then they'll create that lot specifically for that project as far as the size. So this gives them more flexibility moving forward. So at this point, there's just 2 lots and then the platted street with the idea that there'll be additional CSMs in the future. But this gets their project moving forward and allows them to begin selling land. Any questions?
Questions? So basically, this creates a lot on the north and the south side of the street that they have named Performance Drive. Is that right?
Correct.
And if you haven't, you can go out and drive on that street. Yeah. It doesn't go anywhere. Just goes. Stops. Okay, but this creates a lot on each side. Okay, any questions of Joe? Any motion?
I'll move to approve the proposed CSM for the Southwest Health Development, subject to the condition that the CSM shall be recorded with the Grant County Register of Deeds and a copy provided to the city.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason and a second by Kathy to approve the proposed CSM for Southwest Health, subject to it's being recorded with the Grant County Register of Deeds and a copy provided to us. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is set a public hearing on December 13th for taxi and bus fare increases. Howard.
Yes, thank you. We've had discussions last year and then during our most recent budget work sessions to have the option to increase fares for the taxi or bus or for both systems to help cover potential increases in operating costs. DOT requires a notice of public hearing published 40 days prior to holding a public hearing that would impact the public, including fare increases. If the council wishes to hold a public hearing on the last regular meeting date of the year, the notice would need to be inserted in the November 1st publication. If the council decides that a fare increase is not necessary, they can always remove the public hearing or open it and close it with no action taken. At this point, just to let everybody understand how that goes, the federal and state government provides about 56% of the cost to operate our combined transportation system. The remaining revenues are from fares and bus passes and from our local match. The local match is split between the city and the university, 25-75, based on the costs for the different systems. Operating costs are very heavily dependent on fuel and driver wages, and both of those major cost centers have been going up significantly. We have RFPs due back on November 4th. And so we could, staff is recommending that we set the public hearing, open RFPs in November and determine whether or not a public hearing for potential increases is actually necessary.
And we would need to set that now in order to be able to have that public hearing yet this year.
Correct.
We can always, as noted, not hold, either close the public hearing immediately with no action or cancel it.
Correct.
But we can't, if we don't schedule it now and publish it, we can't have a public hearing before the first of the year. And our contract expires at the end of this year.
That's correct. And we have the RFPs due that will start on January 1st. They are due back to us on November 4th.
Okay, questions on this? Kathy?
Will there be an update as far as ridership on, does that happen at the same time, or is that something that we will be updated on an annual basis? I just am questioning because the bus goes by my house multiple times a day. And there's maybe a handful time that I see one rider. So when it comes to the breakdown for the city's responsibility, it's sort of like, I'd really like to see the ridership.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have numbers on that, and I am able to provide those with numbers for like the past 5 years. Unfortunately, the COVID couple of years is a little wonky because, for example, the university wasn't here for a whole year and things like that. But
Didn't we But we also cut back on the bus routes, didn't we?
We also did that.
Right.
True, yes.
Right. So yes, it would be, I'm sure that, has the transportation committee met?
They have not.
I am sure that they'll be meeting soon, right?
I would love to do so as soon as I can schedule that.
Because and they get these reports all the time. So we're looking for a motion to authorize the publication of a public hearing for December 13th, 2022 to consider an increase of the taxi and bus fares. Doing that now so that it's available if necessary.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot, Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols. Motion carries.
Okay, now we're going on to the 2022, that's the end of our action items. So now we're in our information items. So first is the 2022 city goals quarterly report.
Yeah, so this is kind of the updated version here of the city goals as of Q3. So what I provided you is pretty much a breakdown of kind of everything that we've been working on. And as you can see, we've been working on a lot. So we've been busy. The items that you see highlighted in yellow are the ones that are basically outstanding or have not been accomplished yet. So as you can see, the ones that were highlighted, we're basically looking at trying to put in the 2023 city budget to provide a future for marketing investments. Obviously, as we talked about, due to kind of the budget and everything else, we did not break that out individually. We moved that again into there's the city manager contingency. That is where we'll be looking in 2024 to do, or 2023 to do some marketing. And then our hope would be in 2024, we'll try to do that again. So that's why you're seeing that one yellow. The historical storyline are incorporated into a flyer. That is something that our city manager intern is working on. That's going to be one of the projects. He graduates, unfortunately, here in December, but he is working on the finalization of that one. He's been working with Director Flesh and a couple of other areas as well. We continue to recruit new businesses with 50 to 75 jobs. The reason this is highlighted is we are definitely working on this. We have a couple of different options that are out there. We've been working with Ron Brisbois with Grant County Economic Development. There's a couple of leads we've been working on, so we definitely are trying. So we'll kind of keep you updated if we can kind of pull one of those off. As you can see, this kind of one here goes to specifically what Todd kind of alluded to here with the community center. That's something that we've kind of had a lot of conversations on in regards to the Broski Center and now looking at that. So we've had a couple of meetings and we're going to be looking at trying to figure out which way we need to go with that. We're going to look to try to see in November if we can't have both the our state and representatives come in and kind of give a presentation after the election has been done and the budget. I think I'd actually like to invite them to actually come to the budgetary hearing. So that is my plan, to have them actually see that and they can kind of hear the presentation. So that I'm working on that. That's why you see Q4. And then obviously completing our 2022 CIP water and sewer projects and all of our other projects. Those are still kind of in the finalization stage. One is taking a little longer than we would like, so we're working on that. But then obviously some of the other ones that we really have been able to work on, you can see here, are the ones that are not highlighted. So we've done a good job in a lot of our areas in continuing to do RFPs. As far as doing the long-term staffing plan, a lot of our economic development partnerships, working on a lot of our different projects. We've got TC Networks coming in here in the month of November, and they're going to be starting on the camera project, as well as also the upgrades going on here in the council chambers. The inclusive playground, as you notice, continues to be happening. The fire station, we're looking at November 8th, actually we're hoping to have them come in November 8th. They're working on some finalization, but that's the plan right now, is to have them come to the next council meeting and kind of talk about the concept plan. Have you guys take a look at that. So again, and then obviously, Jody has been doing a great job with the communication and providing updates. She worked on one today that went out about pickleball. So there were some questions we were receiving about what's going on with that. So we have that out there. She's doing good with a lot of videos and different things. So all of our department heads have been busy, and those are kind of the updates. So if you have any questions, kind of look these over. If there's anything you want to know specifics, reach out to me and we'll kind of schedule, I'll try to answer it, or we'll schedule a meeting. We can talk further.
Or if anybody has that.
Anybody else, you can fire away now.
If anybody has an immediate question, I'm sure that Adam would take it.
I'm just curious about the Main Street culvert. Like, what do we have any solid information about when it's gonna be done? And like, have there been financial penalties? Like,
Oh,
what's
yes.
going on with that?
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
I can,
You want to take that one or?
I can go ahead.
All right, fine.
The company Dane County Contracting, we officially submitted a letter of default to them and to their bonding company. And late this afternoon, we received contact from an officer of the bonding company to discuss the next steps. And so we and Delta 3 Engineering are providing information to them. I expressed our goal to have at least the culvert in and a temporary pavement for the winter. So they're working on the legal issues from their end to assign a contract to a new contractor.
I can tell you that the hole is very big. So big that last week when my 5-year-old grandson was here and there were 2 backhoes that had been parked on the street, he said to me, "Grandma, where's the other backhoe?" And then we saw it, just the top of it in the hole. That's how deep the hole is. So it's not just a matter of filling the hole.
Yeah.
It's a big project.
It's a big project.
It's a big project. And the culverts are very big. So, all right. And thank you for the update. Thank you for the question, Jason. I have driven on Gridley and Hickory. That seems to be very nice. And it looks like all the landscaping stuff has been, sidewalks are in. I did not see that they've striped it or striped the crosswalk the last time I was on.
Not yet, no.
Okay. And then do we still have thin overlays going in this fall?
We just recently had the thin overlay repair on Dewey Street. That happened today, actually. And then we have the one thin overlay project for 2nd Street. We're coordinating with the other work that's going on right now. The other project that we had was for a full mill and overlay on Main Street to be done in conjunction with West Main Culvert. That one, we've tentatively said that would be delayed until spring. Because like I say, we want to make sure that we have drivable pavement for the winter. We don't want to mess with it at this point. So that part will be next year.
All right. The final information item on our agenda is the City of Platteville Quarterly Financial Report. Adam.
Yeah, so what you can see in here is kind of the new initiative. We wanted to bring council members in the community with a quarterly financial report to showcase areas where the city is exceeding, on track, or below revenue or expenditure projections. So we essentially have 3 quarters of data. So we would expect that for the most part, we would see about 75% of our revenue coming in. And then on the same side, we'd see about 75% of our expenditures. Now, obviously, that's in a perfect world. Things are kind of different in some areas. So as you can see in here, this kind of shows you all of our different kind of revenues that we have from taxes, special assessments, all those areas. For the most part, we are seeing some areas where we definitely are above the mark. If you look at kind of our miscellaneous area, we're at 126%. So obviously we have already exceeded kind of the budgetary number there. Taxes, we're at 95%, licenses, permits, 94, fines and forfeitures, 75. So some of these other areas where obviously they're lower is mainly due to the fact that either that is something that at the end of the year, we have to do a accounting journal entry that then moves money into one of those funds, or specifically like in the intergovernmental section, that is primarily our state shared revenue. And we normally do not get that till Thanksgiving. So that is one of the reasons why you can kind of see that's at 40%. But this just kind of gives you a breakdown kind of where all of those areas are. And then obviously in the further into the report here, we kind of give you a breakdown of the estimated expenditures as of 9/30 of 2022. As you can see, for the most part, we are seeing some increases in some areas, but we are definitely within kind of the percentage of the budget so far. Debt service obviously was the one that we saw a little bit of an increase there just from some bond issuance there. That's normal. That'll be kind of where we expected that. And then as far as general fund expenditures with the airport, one of the reasons we're seeing increases there is because they had increased revenue. If you look at their revenue line item, it's actually way ahead. So that's why they're able to obviously have 100% right now in their percent of budget for the expenditures. Then kind of going through the general fund expenditures, as you can see here, we laid out the various kind of fund accounts from general government, municipal building, insurance. The insurance one we've talked about in the past, that was something that we budget and then we have to deal with kind of as the year goes on if there is an increase. So that's why that is particularly over right now 100%. But looking at all the other areas, for the most part, we were pretty much on track or we're on track. There's a couple of areas where we are now starting to see some impacts, obviously from inflation. So the municipal building account is currently showing an increased percentage over the quarterly average. This is, again, we're seeing increases in costs when it comes to gas, electricity, everything else. So we definitely are starting to see those effects a little bit. So that's something we've obviously monitored and put into the budget, which we'll be talking about here in November. But that's where if you look at the building utilities in all funds and also the fuel usage, building utilities, we're obviously a little high. You can see we're at 92%. Some of that may, kind of bottom out here as we get to some of the cooler, months and temperatures. So we'll see where that goes, but we're continuing obviously to monitor that. And then fuel usage, we are at 76%, which is where we thought we would kind of be, but we have seen some areas where we pretty much are at our max. The police department obviously is there. So that's something we have taken into account in the budget and to accounted for next year, or we're kind of continuing to monitor. Then the last piece of this puzzle is just to kind of give you the chart that showcases what we kind of call the top 12. So we take the top 12 revenue areas that we look at, and kind of the thumbs up is, yep, we're definitely, we got the money, we exceeded where we thought we were. On track shows that we're still showing that we're going to meet that amount. The eye is something that we're continuing to monitor. We're either looking at, we may come in a little low, or we could be definitely under. And then the red flag showcases we definitely are under budget for those items, or we're over budget depending on those. So game plan with this is kind of have you guys take this information and obviously look it over. If you have any questions, please let me know. If there's anything kind of burning you want to ask a question about right now, we'll do our best to try to answer it. But this is just kind of a guide to show you what we kind of look like on a monthly basis and then provide it to you quarterly.
Okay, anybody with any questions at this time on the financial information for Q3 that has been provided?
I don't have a question, but I certainly have a very strong comment. Thank you, Adam. When we first talked about this, and brought up the concern of not knowing where we're at until the end of the year, this is a fantastic report, regardless of some
numbers.
pieces, but the concept of it is really very, very helpful. So thank you for and your team for putting this together.
Any other questions or comments on the quarterly financial report? Adam, could you include in the quarterly financial report any comments that you would like to make based on your attendance at the league conference last week?
Sure. So obviously, I don't like to kind of say doom and gloom, but it definitely was apparent that the big theme that is came out of the conference and is going to be a focal point next year is in regards to levy limits and obviously shared revenue. It is obvious that when talking to multiple municipalities, we are fortunate that we have not had to have the discussion about going to referendum for basically just keeping the operations open. That is not the case for a lot of municipalities that were at the conference. It was very apparent that if something doesn't drastically change in regards to how we are funded, it's the constant conversation we had tonight. We cannot keep taxing residents, because that's the only real option we have right now in order to cover services. So it is the theme that came out of that is if we can't, then essentially the conversation turns to, and again, this is where I don't like to go doom and gloom, but there were multiple municipalities talking about service level reductions from, their swimming pool is not going to be open every day of the week. It's 3 days a week. They talked about libraries. They talked about police officers having to be, it ran the gamut. They talked about not filling positions and administrative staff. So, again, I think, credit to this one over here. She does an amazing job in kind of keeping all of us as directors in check and making sure that, we're following our lines. And we do still have some flexibility in regards to how we can handle our budget. We've talked about that. But it was a little eye-opening that, is if we don't find a new way or a better way to fund operations outside of just continually, it's either you got to grow like gangbusters or you're taxing residents. And that philosophy it's not realistic anymore. So it's coming to, I would say that conversation now is coming to a head where, realistically, you heard it in the debate. And I don't like to get, political because that's not my role. I'm neutral in that. But it was nice to see that comment or question came up directly in the gubernatorial election when they asked both candidates, what is your philosophy, or are you aware of, what is happening with levy limits and everything else? So it is definitely something that when talking to, all of the municipalities and all of the candidates, they're aware. It's just, we got to figure out what's the solution, because in the long term, it was apparent it's going to force an issue where it's either you're going to have to cut something, which is either amenities, or you're cutting something else. So not the way I wanted to end this meeting, but there you go.
No, but I think it's important. I think that's important. Your comments are important for two reasons. Number one, that is the reality.
Yeah.
So it's important that we understand the reality. But I think it also speaks to the fiscal, to how we have focused on fiscal responsibility and trying to contain and do great things, do more with little.
Right. It's that
We
balance.
really, I think it really speaks to having a financial management plan, sticking to it, looking at quarterly reports of what's going on in financing and keeping up with it. So I really commend everyone here on the council and all of our employees for continuing to understand the fiscal, our fiscal reality, which is not necessarily pleasant, but it does make me proud of the way we're handling.
Yeah, the reason we are
The
not
difficulty.
at the level of other municipalities right now going to referendum is because of the work, obviously, of you as a council and the previous council members making some tough decisions and, saying, yeah, we would love to do this. I mean, we talked about that. There's, in the budget presentation, there was about $1 million worth of CIP items that there's no question we should be doing those, but it is the fiscal reality we can't. And even some of the tough decisions we had to make there. And it's the same thing for staff. It's, we take our budgets and we try to make them as thin and as possible as we can. So it's a testament to everybody that we're not in that situation. And we do have, we have reserves, we have capacity, we have the ability to game plan and do that, where it's, you don't want to be doom and gloom, but there's projects we're doing because we've been fiscally responsible. So kudos.
So that ends the information and discussion portion of our agenda. We do have a closed session scheduled, and so I would call for a motion to go to closed session per Wisconsin statute 1985, parent 1, parent C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and this is the city manager evaluation.
Second.
We have a motion by Kathy and a second by Ken to go to closed session. I would say that there will be no action taken that there will be no motions, and so we will adjourn from closed session without action. So Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yeah.
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.